to the evolving situation at an ostrich farm in Edgewood.
What do you want? Leave me alone! You can't handle the truth.
Thanks for watching. I'm your host, David Krayden. You're watching Stand on Guard. And that little intro is because we're not going to forget what happened at the Universal Ostrich Farms. And we'll give you the latest about that near the end of the show today. Things continue to happen here. I'm just checking here. Yes, when we come back, this interview has got to be seen by not just Conservative Party supporters, but all Canadians. It's absolutely incroyable.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
We're going to have a look at some of your comments near the end of the show today. I hear some of you saying you must be short of material. No, it's something we're going to do more of from now on. Is share your comments. Feel like we're in a conversation, a discourse here. I think that's important. I think that's what we have to do more. Why am I wearing merchandise today? You know, I'm either wearing, a turtleneck or a shirt and tie, but we're trying to promote the merchandise. And this in the last week before Christmas, we're going to be offering 10% off starting tomorrow. If all goes well. And I'm going to show you some of the latest merchandise, literally just being created this morning. And we'll have a look at that in a while. But here's what I want you to do. I taped this yesterday, and this is where we need to go if we want to keep freedom in this country. This is David Krayden for Stand on Guard and Krayden's Right News, www.kraydensrightnews.com. You can find all of my information on there, all of my news, everything. Be a subscriber. We need you to subscribe, not just to the station, but be a subscriber on my Substack as well. When you do that, you are fighting back, and you're helping me to fight back against the forces that are aligned against freedom in this country, the forces that want to stop us from having foundational democratic rights. We are fighting a battle for free speech right now in this country. I fight that battle every day. Please be a subscriber. Go, when you watch the station, when you watch the broadcast, hit the bell, like the station, subscribe to the station. We've got to build up these subscriptions. We've got to hype the YouTube station. We've got to hype every broadcast. We've got to get out there and say why Krayden's Right, why Stand on Guard, and why www.kraydensrightnews.com is leading the way in independent media against the forces of tyranny that are aligned against us. We're going to fight back. We're going to continue to fight back because we believe we can win together. And one of the ways you can do that is by supporting this station with any way you possibly can. I am asking for your support because we need it, and we need to move forward for freedom in this country. And I can't say that often enough. There we are. Yes, that is my plea every day. Share this station with your family, your friends, everybody. Because otherwise we get completely steamrolled at times by the algorithm. Sometimes it's my fault. Sometimes it's not. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep fighting back. Now, somebody just commented here, and I see the comments are coming in fast and furious here. And I'm sorry, I got to find it. I hear you've had some terrible weather in Calgary lately. Yeah, I know. Jeff Rath was telling me he couldn't even get in to the airport the other night. I think that was Wednesday night. He couldn't even get into the airport. All right, yeah. Pray for Chris and Big Red today also. Now, I want to confirm or not that the judge is making some action, some decision, some verdict on the truck today on Big Red. I've been following this story, of course, for a year and a half. So I'm trying to get in touch with Chris today. Obviously, he's been on the show several times, and I've interviewed him many, many times over the course of the last horrible 15 months for both Chris and Tamara Leach. But I want to find out what's going on. And yes, pray for Chris any day of the week, because that man has gone through a little bit of hell, or maybe a whole lot of hell, because he stood up for your rights and mine. He stood up against COVID mandates, and he had the balls to do it, to risk his job, to risk a lot. And I wasn't entirely happy with the sentencing. I don't think he should have gotten anything. I think he should have been declared not guilty. But I'm grateful, at least to God, that he was not given a prison sentence, or neither was Tamara Leach. So, yes, keep Chris in your prayers today. Please do. Now, I want to get to this interview, and some of you may already seen it. I'm going to comment extensively on this interview with Michael Ma, the Turncoat Tory, or the Tory Turncoat. I don't know which sounds better. The Turncoat Tory almost tells the truth. He comes very close to telling the truth of why he crossed the floor. Well, it was all about access to Liberal cabinet ministers. Well, in that case, why don't we just have a one-party state? We can all have access to Liberal cabinet ministers and the prime minister. There won't be an opposition. There won't be a choice. We'll just have a one-party state. And of course, having studied one-party states that like to think they're democracies, this is entirely possible in Canada. The way we're going with censorship and surveillance bills, increasingly authoritarian Mark Carney government that's in it for themselves, for their wallets, that is doing everything possible to exempt cabinet and the prime minister from any chance that they will be subject to the criminal code because of decisions they make. We are headed for a dictatorship. And that's a one-party state. And the Soviet Union used to say it was a one-party state, but it used to say, oh, well, we're a democracy. We have a parliament. It's called the Supreme Soviet, except it wasn't supreme. That was a joke. The Politburo, where the Communist Party leadership met to make decisions, that's where the power lay in the old Soviet Union. There was no Supreme Soviet. There is the Supreme Politburo. And, of course, the Supreme Soviet, the parliament, did not enact any laws. They did not make any laws. They did not promulgate any legislation. They just rubber stamped the legislation coming from the Commissariat and the Politburo. Now, I understand the old Soviet system quite well. I was almost on my way to becoming a Sovietologist. Good thing I didn't, because the days were numbered, even at that time, literally years away, for the Soviet Union being an entity. So all those people who were experts in Sovietology really had nowhere to go at that point. But anyway, let's get into this interview. And I'm going to stop repeatedly, not too often, but I want to give you some analysis instead of just playing it. I hear people say, I just want to watch clips. Well, you can watch clips anywhere. Do you want to get some meaningful analysis, assessment? I think that's why you're here.
Ago, Markham Unionville MP Michael Ma was a relative unknown beyond his riding, but after announcing that he was leaving the Conservative Party to join the governing Liberals, well, his name was in the headlines. His decision put the Carney government now one seat shy of a majority, but has also caused a lot of controversy in his riding, including protest and a petition demanding his resignation. So what's this week been like and what's ahead? Liberal MP Michael Ma joins us live now for his first interview on CP24 Breakfast in the wake of this. Mr. Ma, appreciate you being here this morning.
Well, thank you for having me today.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Earlier this year, some 27,000 people in your riding voted Conservative, marking an X beside your name on the ballot. And then you decided a week ago, no, that's no longer for me. I'm joining the Liberal Party. How do you explain or defend your actions to all those people who voted Conservative just several months ago?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank all the volunteers and voters that have placed me in their trust to represent Markham Unionville. As I listened to the people of Markham Unionville and community leaders about the need for Canada to be united and to be strong. So when I listened...
All right, do you believe for a minute that this clown went out and talked to his constituents about what to do? And his constituents and the leaders in the community all told him, Michael, it's time to cross the floor. We were wrong about Mark Carney. He's a unifier. He's standing strong for Canada. What you need to do is join the Liberal caucus and desert the Conservative caucus. You need to betray the people who voted for you because we just didn't get it. We didn't understand that Mark Carney is really a man of principle and a man who wants to fight for Canada. Oh no, don't start going there about Brookfield Asset Management and all the money that company continues to make while Mark Carney's prime minister. Let's not talk about the corruption. Let's talk about how Mark Carney's building Canada back, building Canada strong, and this artificial commitment he has to a pipeline going from Alberta through BC to the Pacific coast. Everything about Mark Carney is artificial. And this man is just like Mark Carney because he's completely artificial. I don't believe for a minute he sought the approval or the consent or even the interest of the people who elected him as a member of the House of Commons.
To that, and going back to my roots, as when I first joined politics, I was a centric conservative, progressive conservative. And at that point, I don't believe in extreme right nor extreme left. And so my beliefs is that Canada and Canadians are mostly in the centrics arena for politics. And when I saw what Mr. Carney was doing in moving the party towards the left and the government towards more centrics route, Mr. Carney's pragmatic and also centrics approach really aligns with mine. And in this economy is a decisive point in our Canadian history.
Okay, so Mark Carney's a centrist, and his philosophy aligns with mine. Well, why didn't his philosophy align with yours on April 28th during the last federal election? Why didn't you run as a Liberal? If his philosophy is so in alignment with yours, why did you run as a Conservative? This is all fakery. This is all nonsense. This is rubbish. It's bullshit. And this guy knows it. You know it. The Canadian people know it.
We're under a lot of challenges with tariffs and other countries around the world. We need a stronger, united country to grow our economy, and we need to continue to fight crime and create a better future for our youth. And I believe that this approach will best represent the people of Markham Unionville, that I could deliver their voices to the forming of policies in Canada, and that will really help the people there.
I hear you there, but
this guy is just so full of hot air. This is a man grasping at straws to justify the unjustifiable. Now, I have to say at this point, look at the record, look at the historical record. Very few people who crossed the floor, especially a guy like this, who's unknown outside of his riding. Nobody's ever heard of Michael Ma. It reminds me of what Pierre once said about MPs, that as soon as they leave the House of Commons, they're nobodies. But I don't know whether that's fair or not. This guy is not known. Does not have a national platform. Does not have a national base. So I don't think he's going to go back to his riding and win as a Liberal, because people are going to look at him like somebody who can't be trusted. That's how they look at most people who cross the floor.
I'm sure you've seen the reaction from your constituents, whether there's 37,000 plus people who signed a petition calling for your resignation, protests outside your office there. A lot of that was about you. What about the people in your riding who are conservatives, who voted for conservative principles and policies? What do you say to them?
Well, it's, like I said, it's about how we best serve the constituents in Markham Unionville. Instead of deepening division of the country, I believe that we are better served when we are with the governing party to be able to help voice our decisions and support the constituents in a much better fashion, and helping us to achieve the goal. My principles have not changed.
My principles have not changed, except I went from one party to another. I moved from the Conservative Party to the Liberal Party. But my principles have not changed. Well, I'm sorry, there's a bit of a difference between these two parties. Maybe not as pronounced a difference as I would like, and many of you would like. Yes, sometimes the Conservative Party of Canada disappoints me. However, folk, it's vastly different on a number of issues than the Liberal Party. That's why we have political debate in this country. We're not all on the same one-party wavelength. And we need to continue to have debate, or otherwise we become a dictatorship. And clearly this guy doesn't get it, because he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. Well, my principles, I'm still a conservative, even though I'm with the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party really is conservative. And the Conservative Party, yeah, is he saying it's a uniparty? Well, sometimes it does look that way, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying his philosophical principles are unchanged, and that is nonsense. He's been bought off.
I'm still believing in fighting crime and growing the economy. And so it's very important for me to continue to represent them.
Oh, how about that? He still believes in fighting crime and growing the economy. Well, does he believe in motherhood and apple pie as well? Absolute nonsense. He can come out with this trash. I would say most Liberals would probably go on CP24, and my thanks for this interview, and say, well, we want to fight crime and we want to grow the economy. It means nothing. These are meaningless words, meaningless phrases.
In the best way, I believe, is for the constituents' benefits.
You talk about your principles not changing, but just in the last 7 months, some of the things you said about the Liberal government, for example, with money printers working overdrive, what future does Canada have under the Liberal feudal regime? I do not see a future here. Day in, day out, the Liberals have shown us whom they truly value. They cater to the common criminals with fairness for the thief, murderer, and drug dealer, and firmness for the honest citizen and compliant taxpayer. This is the party you've just joined here. These are your words from November and December. You talk about principles, but you're really kind of going against what you've just said there.
Well, as I said, in order to fight that, being on the opposition, to be criticizing and deepening that division, I decided to roll up my sleeves and actually do something to it. I have.
Oh, so you didn't mean any of it. You didn't mean that the Liberal government was actually bad for Canadians, but now suddenly they're good for Canadians. Did it have anything to do with a conversation you reportedly had with the ambassador from China? Did it have anything to do with your tete-a-tete with Prime Minister Mark Carney? What were you promised? Why did you suddenly think Mark Carney was perfectly acceptable after criticizing him and the obviously fairly strong words you had been using up to that point?
Now better access to ministers and the Prime Minister to deliver those voices on behalf of the Markham Unionville. I think this is a better approach than creating very negative views and not finding solutions.
Can we talk about the process here, how this all came about? We've heard, Tim Hodgson talk about he's in the riding next door. He'd been speaking to you. Did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did this actually come about?
Well, actually, for the past few weeks, as I said, I've been talking to constituents in the Markham area, and a lot of community leaders demonstrated that they desire a united and strong Canada, and we need to build and grow our economy. And with that, there's been, various discussions and approaches, and I have been reflecting on those comments and situations where I believe that at this point is the right approach. And on the day the announcement was made was when I met with the Prime Minister and reconfirmed my understanding of his vision for Canada, and I believe that's the right approach.
And that was the day after the Conservative Christmas party, which you were at, had a picture taken with the leader.
Now, this is incredible. This is just incredible. He's about to say that he didn't make up his mind until after the Christmas party. That's like saying, you decided you really didn't want to marry this woman until after the marriage. But here he is actually contending and thinking people with rational heads are going to believe this.
Pierre Poilievre at the time, which a lot of people are calling into question, like, you were there the night before, you must have known the next day you were going. Could you elaborate a bit on that, and also what this says to you then about Pierre Poilievre's leadership of the Conservative Party, and if you're aware of other potential Conservative MPs who are considering doing what you've done? Because you're not the first one either.
As I said, this is a decisive moment for Canadian economy and the nation as a whole. And the night I attended the Conservative Party, I was truly a Conservative member and an MP. I have not made a decision at that point. And so it wasn't until I had the opportunity to confirm my understanding of Prime Minister Carney's approach and his vision for Canada. Of course, up to that point, I have reflected on a lot of the comments, as I said, from the people I have talked to in Markham, Unionville, and Canadians at large.
Yeah. You're
obviously not reflecting too much, because I don't think you're getting much positive feedback. There it is. Yeah. Now we're up to 37,500 signatures demanding Ma's resignation. So, whoops. Maybe not.
Now, Pierre Poilievre is going for a leadership review next year in Alberta. You are the sort of second floor crosser. We've also seen one person say they're going to resign and not come back. What do you think, or how do you assess the state of now your former party under Pierre Poilievre's leadership, and what do you think the last couple of weeks say about that?
Well, my job right now is focused on Markham, Unionville. So I am delivering what I promised. As I said, my values haven't changed, and I'm continuing to fight crime and push for a well-balanced immigration policies, and obviously for the benefit of infrastructure investment into Markham, Unionville. So unfortunately, I don't have any other comments for the party.
Let me ask it this way then. Do you think we're going to see more people cross?
Whoa, more infrastructure investment. What does that mean? He got some promises from Mark Carney to shove some money into his riding? That's another way of saying it.
Crossing the floor from the Conservatives to the Liberals.
I don't have a crystal ball, sorry.
We all wish we had crystal balls. Listen, Michael Ma, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for having your first interview here on CP20.
Well, I've got a bit of a crystal ball, and I'm going to tell you, Michael Ma, you're going to lose the next election, because people like you rarely ever put this together, because you think it's going to be unnoticed, forgotten perhaps. Oh, yeah, I ran as a Conservative last time. Here's what's happening in his writing right now.
Yeah, simple message. Hope he gets it.
He's not seeming to get any of our other messages, so.
Another one?
Betrayal to your constituents and to Canada. Resign immediately.
Here we go. Get in there. And the last one.
Traders are not welcome in Canada. Go away, my friend.
Okay, that's it. That's the last one.
I want to get some.
So that's what's happening in Michael Ma's writing. Doesn't look like he's got the consensus that he kept talking about.
Simple message.
This keeps coming back. Now, I want to shift gears to Donald Trump's comments and trade representatives' comments about what they expect from Canada. And we're going to have a look at this because this is quite significant.
What have you learned? Well, it seems those provincial bans on the sale of American booze may have hit a sore spot. Alcohol, dairy, and energy, all three made the list of demands from the U.S. if it is to remain in the three-way trade agreement with Canada and Mexico known as CUSMA. The top trade official for the Trump administration outlined the changes the president wants to see in a report submitted to Congress. For Canada, that includes an end to those provincial bans on the sale of American alcohol, making it easier for American farmers to sell dairy products into Canada, changes to the Online Streaming Act and the Online News Act, which some American tech giants don't like. Some provinces need to make it easier for American companies to bid on projects, and there are other demands as well. The U.S. also wants some changes from Mexico and for all three countries to work together. There is a long list here. It is a big deal to finally see some specifics, given how important this trade agreement is for Canadian workers and Canadian businesses.
It really is. So, Katie, what are we watching for next?
CUSMA is up for review next year. Think of it as a mandatory check-in for all three countries to ensure the deal is working how everyone intended. Canada and Mexico had been hoping this review process would be low-key and easy, but with Trump back in office, it's no surprise he's trying to squeeze his trading partners to make the terms more favorable for Americans. One thing to keep in mind, this is just the start of what is likely going to be a long and messy process. The Trump team could come up with more demands and request additional concessions. Now, we already know what Canada has been pushing for. It wants to stay in the agreement, and it wants to see an end to those separate tariffs that are pummeling Canadian industries: steel, aluminum, copper, and wood. Canada has a monumental task ahead. Keep this three-way trade deal alive in a good enough shape that it can continue to grow the Canadian economy and find a way to get Trump to lift, or at the very least, lower some of those tariffs. It is going to be a year.
It sure is. Thanks for this, Katie. Katie Simpson in Washington tonight.
Now, we got a bit more on this in terms of what was actually happening here. Now, this came from Grok here. I'm going to have to glasses on to read. This is like microscopic print here. The news story stemmed from Greer's formal report and opening statement to Congress. This is Jamieson Greer, U.S. Trade Representative under President Trump. So the stories are coming not necessarily from Donald Trump saying it, but Jamieson Greer representing the opinions and the objectives of President Donald Trump. And they were delivered during closed-door sessions with the House Ways and Means Committee on December 16th, 2025, and Senate Finance Committee, December 17th, 2025. The U.S. Trade Representative's Office publicly released the text of his opening statement on December 17th as a supplement to the consultations required under the USMCA Implementation Act. This document outlines the U.S. positions and lists the specific issues with Canada that must be resolved for renewal, including market access for U.S. dairy, yes, the impact of Canada's Online Streaming Act and Online News Act on U.S. digital services. Scrap them. Provincial bans on the distribution of U.S. alcohol. I mean, that's all theater. That's stupidity. Yes, we need to get rid of that. Now let's go to my X here. And we've got a bit more on this. Yeah, this is table salt does a lot of great reporting. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer told the U.S. Congress that for USMCA review to be successful, Canada must increase market access for U.S. dairy products, among other things. Trump is going for the jugular. Now, here's more about it. For both countries, strengthen the rules of origin for non-automotive industrial goods to ensure that the benefits of trade in those products flows substantially to the parties, enhancing economic security alignment on tariffs, export controls, and investment screening, developing mechanisms to penalize offshoring of U.S. production to Mexico or Canada as a result of regulatory and other arbitrages. Never seen. Developing a critical minerals marketplace to incentivize more mining, processing, recycling, reuse, and manufacturing of critical materials and derivatives products in the region. So that's a little more of it. For Canada, of course, market access for U.S. dairy products. Here we go again. The impact of Canada's Online Streaming Act. And these are the same things. Discriminatory procurement measures in Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, complicated customs registration for Canadian recipients of U.S. exports, and Alberta's unfair treatment of electrical power distribution providers in Montana. So I think it's, yeah. And here's Jason Levine's comment on this. I just noticed this morning myself. So Christopher Wells, a trans activist senator from Alberta, is promoted to have the federal government override Alberta Bill 9 that protects children, parents, and women. I didn't know Chris was an Alberta separatist. If he's successful encouraging Ottawa to overreach on Alberta's constitutional right to use a notwithstanding clause, separation would be a guaranteed outcome. You bet. And there it is. So this guy wants to override the provincial right to use the notwithstanding clause. That's what it comes down. And Jeffrey Rath, of course, was just on the show yesterday. I've got a clip to show later of Jeffrey Rath. But here he is. I met with senior U.S. officials. They understand Alberta oil threatens Chinese interests. Ottawa keeps blocking it anyway. There's more support for Alberta energy in Washington than in our own capital. That should alarm every Albertan. We need Albertan independence. I think this, and this is actually from our show.
At the U.S. State Department yesterday, meeting with senior State Department officials, and I have to tell you, the fact that that pipeline was on the agenda of our discussions. And, you don't want to hear the real interesting thing about it. The Americans, first of all, are enthusiastic about the idea of Alberta independence. They see it as a very welcome way of getting rid of Chinese influence and control over the third largest oil field in the world. Because as far as everybody is concerned, the shutdown of the Alberta oil field, the tanker ban, the emission caps, all of those policies are made in China to prevent Alberta Oil and Gas from providing a stable supply to Japan and Korea, which are against Chinese interests, right? So the Americans are fully in favor of an independent Alberta and would support a pipeline to the U.S. Northwest. So, isn't it funny that Albertans can go to Washington, D.C., meet with senior officials at the highest level of the U.S. administration, and there's more support for a West Coast pipeline from Alberta in Washington, D.C. than there is in Ottawa. People need to let that sink in.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And I'm very, very interesting. I've got another clip from my interview with Jeff Rath that I show you. But I want to just go through some of your comments right now. Actually, let us go to merchandise because this is huge. Here it is. This is the new edition. Green Grifter Alert. Now I know this is going to be a popular favorite. I know we're gonna have trouble keeping them in stock the way we did with the ostrich hoodies, and hopefully we'll have, we're going to sell more of those. But this, I think, is a perfect gift for Christmas. Order yours today. And we can do that. But let's have a look at the merchandise.
Ho, 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 ho.
Who cares?
And there we are. Yes. Want to mention too, of course, the 10% reduction sale that I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. I said Saturday. Today starts today, 10% off all merchandise in the store. Happy to say your support is so much appreciated for Universal Ostrich Farms, for Katie Pasitne and her mom. We were able to give the farm $1,500 this week as a result of the proceeds from sale of those ostrich hoodies. Keep buying the ostrich hoodies. We're hoping that Katie and her mom take over the sale of these hoodies directly from the farm. And that, of course, is something they can do any day. They have just been so overburdened with life right now. And this is something we're going to be talking about at the end of the show here. And the potential exists to get the quarantine lifted. And I'll be talking about that at the end of the show. And this is very good news. But as I said, we're hoping Katie and her mom can start selling the ostrich hoodies or whatever other ostrich merchandise they choose to sell directly from the farm. And that is, I think we'll be working on that over the next week or so, because this remains an incredibly pressing point. And I want to show a brief clip here with Jeff Rath, where he talks about how Alberta independence is not going to be co-opted as it has been in the past. I think
that Albertans can go to Washington, D.C., meet with senior officials at the highest level of the U.S. administration, and there's more support for a West Coast pipeline from Alberta in Washington, D.C. than there is in Ottawa. I mean, people need to let that sink in. And keep in mind, we're there as representatives of the Alberta Prosperity Project and the Alberta Independence Movement. So we don't have, the authority to, sign trade deals or sign pipeline deals or whatever it is. We are there fact-finding on behalf of the Alberta Independence Movement and people that want to vote for independence, so we can tell them and educate them as to what an independent Alberta is going to look like. And a lot of people obviously have concerns about Alberta being landlocked, and we want them as much as we can find out the degree to which, that would not be true in an independent Alberta by having these meetings, with U.S. officials. And I am telling you that the U.S. is enthusiastically in favor of Alberta independence, would support, another pipeline to the Gulf Coast that doesn't have to go through the Midwest hub. That would support a pipeline to the West Coast, as we just discussed. They would be, open, to or in favor of complete reciprocal free trade, so zero tariffs on both sides of the border, with zero restrictions on the free movement of labor from Alberta to the States and back and forth. Much like the early days of the European Common Market before the bureaucrats got involved, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Like, we would have a much better deal as an independent Alberta with the United States than we currently have with Canada. And we're dealing with people that are friendly, they're interested in what we have to say, they care about, the rights and freedom of the citizens of Alberta, and they're very respectful of, the rights of self-determination of the citizens of Alberta. They don't want to interfere in our process. They want, us to have a, good referendum process. They want us to be able to, all Albertans to have a say in what their future is going to look like. And, they're there meeting with us and talking to us and providing reassurances in the background that the United States will be very supportive of a free and independent Alberta should Albertans choose that, right? So,
Yes.
We thought it was a phenomenal meeting. It was, we moved past, the initial introductory meeting we had, where we went and met with them to tell them what we were all about. Our last meeting, things moved along a little bit further. This meeting, things went even further, right? In terms of our discussions and getting a really good sense of what, the U.S. administration would be open to in the event that Albertans vote to become an independent nation state, independent for both Canada and the United States.
What did you think of Pierre Poilievre's motion to try to get the Carney government to essentially prove that it really wants to build a pipeline? I thought I'll just put this out there. I thought it was politically very stupid of Mark Carney to oppose it because he's effectively given Pierre Poilievre the license to continue to accuse him of not supporting a pipeline for however many years we have to put up with Mark Carney in this position somewhere between a minority and majority government. But I think it was politically very stupid. I think Carney could have essentially co-opted Poilievre and the Conservative Party by supporting that motion, saying we're all on the same page, we're all federalists together, we're all believing in this pipeline. But instead, he had to make it acrimonious, and I think politically, Poilievre came out on top of that. What did you think?
But I have to tell you, like Pierre putting that motion forward, Danielle was having a really hard time deciding that day who she was angrier with, me or Pierre Poilievre, right? Because what Pierre Poilievre actually did was prove exactly what I've been saying, which is that MOU is not worth the paper it's written on, right? And the reason it's not worth the paper it's written on is because the Liberals have no intention whatsoever of honoring their side of the deal. Like, they haven't lifted the tanker ban. They haven't, they haven't officially lifted the emissions cap. Julie Dabroussin came out of her hole in the ground immediately after the UCP AGM to clarify that when Danielle says that Danielle has freed the Alberta power grid up from net zero regulations, Julie Dabroussin says, oh no, we did not agree to that. We agreed that Alberta could come to us with a new proposal with how they can save more carbon in a different way. And if we agree, only if we agree, we will agree, like that, right? So, ever since the MOU has been signed, every time you turn, and then there's Carney continually repeating that everybody, should, be, calm down about the MOU because he's negotiated a 600% increase to the industrial carbon tax, right? Yeah. So every time you turn around, Carney and the Liberals are making Danielle look foolish and making it look like that they've literally put one over on her and have made her look like the dumbest person on the entire planet, right? And then, Pierre Poilievre comes along and says, okay, well, let's just strip all the crap away from this MOU, the carbon sucking machine and, a pipeline if necessary, but not necessarily a pipeline. And let's just take it down to brass tacks. When's, shovels in the ground, there's going to be a pipeline. We want you to vote on it. This is the language in the MOU that's, crystal clear and does that. Well, of course the Liberals aren't going to vote for it. They've never intended it. And once again, Pierre Poilievre has succeeded in proving that MOU is not worth the paper it's written on, right? So, no wonder Danielle was mad at him. He pulled the rug right out from underneath her feet, right? Yeah. So, that's the problem. And now her big saving grace is to grasp on to what myself and Dennis Modry and Mitch Sylvester and a bunch of other people have been saying for the last couple of years. Why are we even talking about BC? Why are we talking about, Quebec and the rest of it? Why aren't you meeting with the United States and negotiating a pipeline deal to the West Coast? Just like Saskatchewan, did with Nutrient, right? I've been, every time I've been stumping for APP, all year at town halls, That's what I'm talking about. One of the benefits of Alberta independence is we just build a pipeline to the West Coast through the United States. We don't even have to talk to BC. And now Danielle, because she's understanding that the MOU is not going to work, I guess we have to be grateful for it, I suppose. But now, she's coming out and saying, oh, well, yeah, we could consider having a West Coast pipeline. And I understood from talking to a journalist that raised the issue with her that, it was almost him raising the issue with her after I'd raised the issue that gave her the idea that she should glom onto the idea, just to shut people up and make it look like she's doing something.
Yeah, like certainly, whereas a northern BC route is fraught with difficulties, and I think it's going to be a hell of a job to complete because of the opposition in the province, because of the environmental eco-terrorist groups that are going to oppose it at every opportunity. Why not consider a southern route and when it's welcomed and when it's not going to invite the same amount of acrimony from the people in the
there's
area.
Existing pipeline rights of way that get you almost all of the way there. Or alternatively, you could build in the ditches of the existing highways that go, that through the highway right of ways that go all the way to the West Coast. There's all kinds of ways to get a pipeline there through existing rights of way that aren't going across, Indian reserves, lands that are outside of the federal jurisdiction, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's no reason that the Trump administration couldn't get that done with an executive order, which we know Donald Trump is very good at signing.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I don't know why, why it is that people like myself and Dennis Modry and Mitch Sylvester and, LeVar Payne, a retired member of Parliament for Medicine Hat, and the other members of Parliament that are with our, that are part of our, U.S. liaison committee, Rob Anders, Eric Lowther, all these retired members of Parliament, some of the names you may remember from your days,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And, why it is that, we have to go and meet with the United States to get these things going and initiate discussion, and why Danielle doesn't have a team of people doing this. I've been saying for years, and a former professor of mine wrote Kenny 6 years ago, why don't we have a minister of independence preparedness in Alberta, right? That's working on all of these things. Like, it wouldn't surprise anybody that one of the things that we're talking to the U.S. about is, helping them facilitate meetings, on a, the best way to put it would be on a feasibility study basis, to meet with the U.S. Treasury and to meet with J.P. Morgan to set Alberta up with a $500 billion line of credit. Why do we have to do that? Why isn't the government of Alberta doing that? Because think about Alberta, if it had a $500 billion line of credit secured with our oil reserves, it would be very easy to do. We wouldn't even necessarily need to draw on it. But think about the strength that would give Alberta negotiating with the federal government. It's like, instead of like the way negotiations have always gone with Alberta, oh, please, federal government, may we please have something nice. And the federal government says no. And if you keep insisting on having something nice, we're going to withhold your money from you, right? Which is pretty much how it always goes, right? But if Alberta had a $500 billion line of credit set up, backed, by the, good faith and credit of the United States of America, right? Think about the strength of our negotiating position when it comes time to talk to Canada and the rest of the provinces about leaving, right? Those are the types of things that we think it's important that the Alberta government discuss with officials in the United States. They shouldn't be leaving it to us to do, but, I guess, if they refuse to do it, independent citizens who can carry the banner forward and initiate these discussions on a feasibility basis.
Yeah, and that's very, very good observation. Why aren't they ready for this? If you look back, though, a year ago, right now, Danielle Smith was working from an entirely different set of assumptions and objectives, I think, because she was the only Canadian political leader invited to Donald Trump's inauguration. And she was meeting with Donald Trump on a regular basis at Mar-a-Lago. She was clearly indicating that she wanted a close relationship with the Trump administration. And I don't know why between then and now she suddenly thought that Mark Carney can be trusted.
It's baffling to me, right? It's completely baffling to me. Other than Other than I know that there are a lot of billionaires in Alberta that have Danielle, and some who've left Alberta that are expatriates that have Danielle on speed dial. And a lot of them, and I mean, I'm saying this isn't things that I'm making up. Modry and I were invited to this goofy meeting that was chaired by Michael Binion, and we're not allowed to talk about the content of it, but under Charter House rules. But suffice it to say, a little cabal of Alberta billionaires thought it was important to haul Modry and I to a meeting to tell us what their plans were. Their plans are what they call reconfederation. So they want to use our movement to generate enough stress on Confederation and the threat of Alberta separation so that they then, can swoop in and, be the adults in the room to negotiate, appropriate amendments to the Constitution to make Alberta happy. And we just flat out told them, it's like, look, Alberta independence is an express train going down a track. You're either on board with it or you get run over. But don't tell us, insult us by inviting us to a meeting to tell us that, that you don't think that, that you don't want independence and that your idea is just to let us get far enough ahead that you can then push us aside and along with Danielle Smith, negotiate a better place for Alberta within Canada. We're done with Canada, right? And those are the people that are in Danielle's ear, right? Michael Binion was on Danielle's, stupid what's next panel meetings. So, when people ask me why I'm annoyed with Danielle, that's why I'm annoyed with Danielle.
Anyway, that is interesting to me, that there's already sort of an attempt by well-known people who are small C conservatives usually. Sometimes they belong to Reform, Canadian Alliance, Conservative Party of Canada, who are working to co-opt the independence movement in Alberta. And Jeffrey Rath identified that in this interview. I think that might be the most significant thing I think he revealed. That he's been at these meetings and the pressure is on to co-opt the independence movement. And it's all about a new federalism, a renewed federalism. Remember the West wants in? That was the basis of Preston Manning and the Reform Party. And I think people were willing at that time to give it another chance. Maybe we needed a Western-centric party that could uphold what Western Canada wanted. But that's very interesting to me. Now, I want to show a couple of your comments here, because this is interesting. I know this for a fact. The people of Markham know he got paid off, talking about Michael Ma. Just want to read some of your comments here. I love this. Chinese dictators told Ma to cross the floor. Carney got a loan from China, so this was part of the deal. China wants a majority liberal government, so Canadians are 100% under communism. Very interesting. I've come to the point of not really doubting anything. Before we get to Katie Bissett-Nay's latest comments, and hoping to talk to Katie today. She's been away all week visiting family, just had to get away from it all. But there's a good possibility, thanks to some very significant people who are working for Katie in the farm. I don't mean working in terms of being paid for it, but have their interests in mind and believe that they can get some change from Ottawa. They've told me that they believe it's very conceivable to get this quarantine lifted if Environment Canada can overrule the CFIA, which they can, and they will do if given the right criteria, which I believe, from what I've seen, the farm has. So this is what I'm working on later today and maybe throughout the weekend. But I want to show you Katie's comments. I think she was in Kelowna when she recorded this. But it's very interesting because what she says here is precisely why we need to overrule the CFIA.
Hi everyone, again, it's me. I just wanted to pop on here. This is just about the new Canadian Food Inspection Agency laws that they are passing, when everybody on one side was thinking that we were overreacting. I want to read you a little bit of what is coming down the pipeline. CFIA is moving toward mandatory livestock movement tracking across Canada by 2026. Premise IDs tied to every location, short reporting timelines, centralized federal databases, and stronger enforcement powers. Now, again, this isn't just about cattle. This isn't about just livestock and farmed animals. It includes non-traditional species animals as well. What happened to our ostriches was not an isolated event. It was just a test case. We weren't anti-biosecurity. Let's just get that straight. We weren't anti-science. And we definitely were about pro-evidence decision-making processes, pro-science, and pro-choice. Pro-testing to test our animals for survival. Our fight was never just about the ostriches, and this is just another reason why. If Canadian Food Inspection Agency, being such a large agency, is continued to allowed to go unchecked, they're growing every year. They're getting more powerful every year, and they're getting way more. They get to do whatever they want with no accountability. So one more reason that we need to rise up is the brand new laws that are coming out next year that they are just passing. Canadian Food Inspection Agency livestock tracking and identification movement on your premise. So you would not be allowed to sell a goat or a cow or sheep or pig or chicken without the government being let know of exactly what you sold, where, why, more control. So before we allow this to fully take hold, I'm asking you to rise up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Katie, and we will continue to rise up. Just looking at some of your comments here, it's interesting. I see Jeff Rath is very polarizing. Well, we have him on, but I've taken no position on this issue. I think the harder Alberta pushes back on Mark Carney in Canada, the better for Canada, that we might have the Canada back we used to have. I think the threat of separation is the only thing that might turn this country around. But I'm not taking a position on whether or not Alberta should be independent or not. I'm allowing people to discuss it. And as I said, I think we need to discuss this. And I think Canada is finished as a country anyway if Mark Carney and that Liberal Party ideology triumphs. So don't kid yourself to think, oh, it's all the Alberta separatist fault. Mark Carney brought this on himself. Yeah. But that's fine. Your comments are welcome. You love Jeff Rath or hate Jeff Rath, love what he's saying or hate what he's saying. This is a place of free discussion. That's what we're here for. Anyway, can't believe we're going on this long today. Want to put this out there as well. And I see the numbers are really low today. Got to break the algorithm. But thank you for watching. Dan Bongino resigned this week as deputy director of the FBI. Why do you think he did it? I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow. Why do you think Dan Bongino resigned? Because the Epstein files are being released today, and he was embarrassed. Because all he's apparently done since he's been deputy director of the FBI is redact documents. Or do you just think he couldn't take it anymore? This is a guy who used to have an honest podcast, who used to be a guy who fought for individual rights, who fought against corruption. He became part of the deep state. I don't think he could stand it anymore. I think he just said, I can't do it. I'm breaking up. I think that's what happened. Anyway, thank you for watching today. Think about that. We'll be back again tomorrow. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.